Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Mark Sylvester here, the ambassador for 805 Connect with another 805 conversation. These conversations so far are getting, we're having conversations about the conversations, which is exactly what we wanted. And we've got a great announcement this month. Our good friends in Goleta, Citrix, are our newest sponsor. In fact, they're sponsoring our 805 conversations. They haven't given me anything to say other than thank you, and we really appreciate them. So some technical things. If you've got a question, if the audio isn't working right or you can't see me or something happens, just type in the question area. Kimberly will take care of that. If you have questions as we're going, as Robert's talking, type them in the question area, and then Kimberly will feed those to us at the end. We've reserved 5 minutes at the end for that. We are recording this, so we found that people do like to come back to it afterwards and find some key bits, or they want to share it with someone. So we'll have that posted at 805connect.com/brand strategy, and that'll probably be up later this afternoon. And if you are going to tweet, you kind of need to be paying attention, but if you do want to tweet, please use the hashtag 805conversations. And of course, I want to thank all of the sponsors and the partners that we have. This public-private partnership could not exist without the help and financial support and moral support and content support of all of these fine people. And we just announced our March partners in our newsletter this week. I know Greg Van Ness of Tolman and Wykers on the call here. Greg, thank you so much. And this is the kind of quality that you'll come to expect, just lots of smiling faces and great conversations in our once a month webinars. And then let's get going. So Robert has been a colleague and friend for well over 20 years. When I was at Wavefront, he came in and helped with his partner, Brett Poston, helped us come up with some kind of really meaty strategic marketing issues. And ever since that time, he's helped with intro networks. In fact, Robert, you'll remember there was you and Brett who helped Kimberly and I come up with the name Intro Networks in the first place.
I do. I remember it well.
That was great. So Robert has worked with all major brands, lifestyle brands, all kinds of brands all over the world, done a lot of work in New York City, and he has a lot of clients here in the 805 as well. And Robert, thank you so much for spending time with us. Let's get going. You ready?
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be with you as always.
So what we're talking about and what we've learned in dealing with people, members in the 805, is that this idea of marketing and positioning and branding and all of that, we all talk about it, but I don't know that we all really understand it, especially by the kinds of questions that I hear from people. I know we have a lot of marketing people in 805 Connect, so I hope some of them are on. Are going to ask you some hard questions. But why don't we just start with defining the terms?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to do. I think when it comes down to think about how to market your business, most of us are familiar with the term brand, and I run into a lot of different views on what people mean by brand. So I think it's really important to define the terms, because I think your perspective of it can really have a really big impact on where you end up, on what kind of marketing decisions you end up making. So let's just start with defining some of these terms. I think the first thing is, what will happen is I'm able to get the opportunity to speak before a lot of classes, teaching as a guest lecturer at different universities. And one thing I like to ask at the very beginning to do this is say, when we define the term, is I'll point to the Apple image on the front of my computer, and I'll ask the question, is this a brand? Who thinks that's a brand? Obviously I'm asking it in the classroom, so it's probably a trick question. And how about some people say, yeah, that's a brand. And I think that fits a lot of people's perspective. But the truth is that's not a brand. That's an icon mark. That's a logo mark. And that is a symbol for a brand called Apple that's based up in Cupertino. But the company that has employees and a building and exists in space. But the logo itself is just a mark. The brand is something different. And I think, I invite you into this perspective because I think it makes you think of it differently. The brand is not your mark. The brand is the image that your audience has in their head about what your company is, the overall impression after they've seen everything that you've done. overall. So brands don't really exist in time and space. Brands exist in somebody's head.
Hmm.
Brands exist in your audience's head. So you could say that a brand is not what we as the marketers say it is. It's what the audience says it is. So if the brand exists inside your head, then branding is the work that we do in order to shape what that impression is. Okay, so I think some
So,
important distinctions.
so fussing about the color of the logo and the shape and all of those things is kind of premature until you've understood what you stand for, what you mean.
I think that's really right. In the end, the logo, just like everything else, is just one of the touch points that
Oh.
somebody might run into that says something about your brand. So maybe if somebody comes up to me as a marketer and says, "Oh, you're a professional marketer," and they'll show me their business card and they go, "What do you think of our logo?"
Oh.
Well, it's hard to answer because the question is, well, in the context of what? What are we trying to do? Are you trying to look sophisticated? Are we trying to look fun? Are we talking to women? Are we talking to men? It's really important in order to make wise communication decisions, to know if you're putting dollar to work to do the right thing, to have some context, to understand, some clarity on what our objective is, who our audience is, and what the brand promise that we're making there. From there, then we can begin to determine, well, are these wise decisions or not?
You do. We're talking about terms now. What do you mean brand promise? I mean, I've heard that before, but it sounds kind of jargony to me. What does that
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, you know what? And don't be jargony. It's just boil it down to what can they expect from me? What can my
Oh.
audience reasonably expect from me? What would I like them to expect from me? Yeah,
So
so I
that's
think
what the
like that,
promise.
and a lot of times I get tired of the jargon too, and I think that's why we need to define the terms because I think it
Right.
becomes all this other meaning. I would love to jettison it. We need some new language at some point. We're not going to do it on
What?
this talk, but I think
No,
we
no. Well,
define.
okay. So the last one is when you say touch points, what does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, let's talk about, okay, so if the brand exists in their head, in their audience's head, how do they
Yeah.
get that impression? How do they
Hmm.
form that impression? Well, I believe that every interaction that they have with your brand says something about your brand. Every interaction pulls for or against a conclusion. And the question is now, do we know what that conclusion is? But I draw this spoke diagram. I must have drawn it 1,000 times or more.
Right.
You've seen me draw it.
I
And
sure have.
it's your touch point map. And really, it's a simple idea that makes a really powerful point. And that is, just imagine your brand is the center of the spoke. And you got
Right.
spokes coming off of it. To every single place that an audience might interact with me, there's a spoke to your website, a spoke to your business card, your corporate identity, a spoke to maybe if you have a location. What's the space look like? What's it saying? What's the media saying about it? What are people saying? And you could go around and determine every single touch point that your brand interacts with. If you're whatever car you're driving, an Audi or BMW or whatever, you can if you really sat back and
Really? Even the
isolated.
car you drive when you show up to pick them up for lunch?
I think from your standpoint, absolutely. I think anything says something about your brand and about you, or it can. I think from this point, just think about any product that you like, whether it's your car or it's your computer, and you can step back and isolate all the times that you've encountered it, whether
Hmm.
it was on the web or something somebody said, and that universe forms your brand. And I believe that's why when you realize that, then you could start looking at, well, what is that particular touch point saying about my brand? And back to the point, so your business card pulls for or against a brand impression. Your website pulls for or against your brand impression. So when you look at it like that, it's not necessarily about the tactic. It's what do we want that tactic to say? And you can begin to analyze your logo, your brand name, your action on, does that achieve this brand goal that we want to achieve?
So that leads to our second question is all of these interactions with you and your brand. We were talking about what does someone think in their head when they have some encounter with you, answering the phone, have lunch, go to your website. And all of those interactions are so important. There's so much to think about. How do you control those, or what are the kinds of things that we do with those interactions?
Well, I think the important place to start with, because it really doesn't have to be complicated. The idea is really simple. It
Okay.
can get complicated depending on how big is and varied is your audience. But it starts with understanding, do we know what we want to communicate?
Hmm.
Do we know who we're talking to and what conclusion we'd like them to draw? And I think that's one thing. It might seem obvious. I run into it a lot, but it's not always clear. And I think that's something we'll talk about at the end as an exercise to do to really
Oh,
get
good.
down to understand, do we understand it? And then there's many ways to get deeper into understanding your brand. But I think that it just comes down to, I believe, if you believe in that philosophy that my brand is the sum of those touch points, well, then I need to have some clarity on who am I talking to and what is the conclusion I'd like these touch points to add up to. And I think that's really what my company is about. My perspective is called the core idea perspective, because core ideas are about discerning these things, about sorting these things out based on my specific objective that I have for my brand. Maybe it's a nonprofit organization, maybe a for-profit business.
Right.
What is my brand objective? What's the brand landscape on which I'm competing on? Who else is out there? What else? What are people seeing? And then what does the audience think right now? And where do we want to move them? And I think to have that clarity can lead you to what I call core ideas. So there's key insights. Why do we believe that? What is it that we know that makes us believe we can communicate and connect with these people in a meaningful way? And simply just to clarify that. And there is a 5-minute version of that. Just sit down and mark those out the best you can. And I've been on 6-month campaigns that
have you
deep research and spending tens of thousands of dollars to go validate it. Those kind of things. You need clarity. And then there's questions on, well, how much validity do you feel like you need in order for your team to go off in that direction?
I'm reminded of TED when you talk about this, because TED's about ideas worth spreading. And we just did a TEDx last week, and we think about when Kimberly's coaching one of the speakers, it's about what is that idea? It's similar to your thing of the core idea. Can we get it down? Can we peel the onion away to that one singular thing? And so what I'm hearing here is, do we all, as small business owners, medium, large business owners, can we say what that core idea is that's not a tagline, it's not a slogan, it's just real crystal clear? Would you say that, we'll stay on this for just a second, do you think people can answer that question quickly in general or not?
Some can and some can't. And a lot of times what I find out, like you get a deer in the headlights look sometimes. But I think oftentimes it's in the room. Like the idea, it's not like I'm coming in as the marketer to bring the idea in. It's there. But the question is, have we clarified it? Have we got it down to where we can say, at least to set a context, so like, for reasonable people can be aligned to make, smart decisions. So, it's not unusual to walk into a very successful, profitable company with super sophisticated people who do not have clarity on this yet. And it happens, and it's not because they're not smart. It's just they're not thinking about this in a way, or there's legacy thinking that's happening here. But this is just a way to kind of peel away everything else and try to get down to the heart of what's important, so you can feel like you're making a smarter and more confident decision, but also aligning everybody. And you can bring more people on the team that way to align their whatever creative service they're bringing to serve.
I mean, I can speak with experience of working with you over the years, specifically with 805 Connect in the very beginning, how you really helped get to the exact, the core idea of what we were doing. And
did it hurt? Did it hurt, Mark?
No, it didn't hurt. What I was doing hurt. It was hurting me because I wasn't articulating. It wasn't as clear as it needed to be. And then you kept saying, no, you can't have this blunt instrument. You need a stiletto. You need a real fine point on it. And it's, even though I've been working with you for so long, you still need to hear this and be reminded of that. Specifically, as you just said, as you're bringing other people on and getting everyone aligned, and you kind of test things against that. Let's move to
really quick, Mark, just on that.
Yeah, sure.
I think being creative or starting businesses, a lot of times it's about deciding. It's deciding, creative, and it's hard to decide. And I think that's what you and I have had the conversation many times.
Sure.
And so we have a lot of things we want to say, and maybe our thing is even complicated. But I believe that the message has got to be clear and simple. That the whole concept doesn't have to be simple, but the way we enter into it needs to be. Otherwise, as we've talked about many times, you're really just pushing the onus onto your audience to figure it out. What is the core idea? They have to. Why is it connected? So I think it's important to. Well, it's not just important. It's fruitful to do that hard work on the front end to kind of lead you then to be smarter and more deliberate about how you're communicating with people and lead them.
Do you think this is, well, when we were talking before this and I was writing about what we were going to talk about, you said that it's not a one-time exercise. This is something you do all the time. Do you have some recommendation for when you revisit this idea of your core idea?
I just think for me, it's a perspective. I just invite people to accept this perspective. It's branding, that line was, yeah, branding's not a one-time event. It's a forever perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Branding is a way that we look at communications and how we're communicating our brand. We're doing, making big brand decisions at the beginning, but really it's something that happens constantly and all the time. I invite companies to be revisiting it always. And I think it gets down to, it can happen on the micro level. Just simply ask, anytime we're communicating anything, are we doing this in a way that's consistent with the brand? Are we using design or style and or activity to lead the audience to a particular conclusion? And I think just to begin right there all the time, that never stops.
So I've watched all 5 seasons of Mad Men, and it's still not sinking in. So that's why I'm glad to hear this from you. Let's go to our final area here is around the difference between strategy and tactics.
Yeah, it's kind of a full circle back to defining terms again. I think I consider myself a communication strategist. I end up helping people with brand, and I help them launch, and I'm a creative director, but I think about it as strategy. And I think that, again, kind of like brand, these are powerful terms. It's not about just being correct. It's understanding these things in a way that empower you to use them. And I think, so strategy and tactics, a lot of people are caught in what I call tactical thinking. Okay, so they want to call the marketing guy, and they want to say, hey, we need a print ad. Tell us about the print, help us make a great print ad. And anything that you use to touch your audience, in my opinion, I'm sure there's debate and people have different views on this, but I believe anything that touches your audience from your brand is a tactic. It's a tactic.
So all the touch points we talked about earlier, those are all tactics.
Yeah, and so they can, and the tactic can be evaluated in the context of the strategy. Okay, so is this a good tactic? Well, I don't know. What's our strategy? Okay, and strategy is just your big plan and your belief on how you're going to accomplish the mission. Tactics are the specific things that we're doing in order to accomplish that mission. So I heard this a while back, and I just love this example, and I don't speak Greek or Latin or any of this, so I'm going to get this kind of right. Okay. But the spirit's there. I think of it like this. Strategy comes from a Greek word called strategos, and it's related to leadership in general. Tactic comes from tactica, which is related to soldiers. So you can imagine your strategy is up here on the hill, your stratego is up here on the mountain watching the battlefield with all the tactica running around to do their battle. Okay, so the soldier doesn't really know what the strategy is. He just knows I'm supposed to go out there and shoot this arrow or whatever. Similarly, your print ad is designed to be a great print ad, but for what? It's in context of your strategy. So strategos, your strategy is up on the hill watching your tactics in action and determining if they're working or not. So that's the way I go about it. Hopefully people will find that useful too.
Well, I think that's exactly it. In fact, it's reminiscent of last month when we talked to Chris Foley, and he's a web strategist, and he has people and does a lot of social media. They'll say, well, I need Facebook, I need this many likes on Facebook, and I've got to be on Twitter, and I've got to be on Pinterest, and I've got to do Instagram. And he's like, hold it, why? There's without a strategy. So it's the same thing, but in his deployments, because everything is all so social and so on the web, that's going to be a very big component of what people do. So it's interesting to hear you guys say very, very similar things. I want to save time for questions, but one of the things we like to do is ask our speakers to give us 3 tips. I want these to be really actionable conversations so that they're not theoretical. We can do that. Give us 3 things that we could do this afternoon, and then everyone can write those down, and then we'll take some questions.
All right. Well, okay. So yeah, 3 things. It's kind of a set of things here, but the first thing I would do is I think a quick actionable thing to find out kind of where you are on all this is, I think, get anybody who's making a decision that makes decisions about how to communicate the brand in a room. Okay? So maybe it's the president, might be the vice president, the marketing director, I don't know, whoever it is that gets to make a decision about the content or the look and feel of anything that our brand does, and sit down in a room, and each of you take a piece of paper and, in order, answer these questions without showing each other or talking. Answer each of these 3 questions in one sentence. And the first question is, what is it? Okay, what is it? What is it? And it's the brand. What is it? Okay. In one sentence. Okay.
Okay.
What does it do?
Okay.
Okay. Third, why does it matter?
Huh.
Okay, and here's what you're going to see. This is where you find it's very rare for those all to be the same, but they need to be. People making decisions
Oh.
about the brand need to agree on what this is, what the definition of the thing that we're doing. Start there. Start there. And what you'll find is, let's just align that, first of all. Okay? The second thing is, this is kind of, it's related, but it might seem obvious, but people just blow by it. Can we write down on a piece of paper, maybe a sentence, maybe two? Why are we communicating?
Why are we communicating?
Or here's another way to ask it. How can communication help? Literally. Can it get down to, like, do we want the phone to ring? Am I trying to build awareness? Am I trying to draw a distinction to something? Like, can we say specifically how communications can help our business today? I think to answer that, can we say it and agree? Because if you can't, that's kind of funny, isn't it? These are powerful, simple, little powerful things. Okay, and then the last one is, again, one sentence. What is the number one? What is the single most important conclusion your audience can draw about you? What's the number one thing? It's very hard to do because there's many things about every brand. And entrepreneurs like to have latitude. They want to say we're lots of things, but no.
Right.
But if you had to decide, this exercise says there is one. And imagine, okay, maybe it's thinking your most important customer or your aspirational customer. And it's like you could do a brain lock with them and send the message in right now. What is it? What is it? Can you say that? And I think to get down to that will clarify your thinking and align your team. And it might kind of show a little exposure.
Why don't you repeat the last question?
The last one is, what is the single most important conclusion that your audience can draw about you? Or what's the most number, like we're talking about the brand exists in their head, so
Right.
branding is forming that conclusion. What is the
Right.
number one thing in one sentence that we want them to conclude about us?
So give us some examples.
Oh, well, I'll tell you.
What do you think Apple, what does Apple want us to think?
Well, I know that they think of their core idea around the lines of humanizing technology. Okay. So how do you take technology and remove any of the barriers that might make us afraid and non-human about it? And so that's part of their core idea of understanding that that's what they want to do with everything they do. And Steve Jobs realized that design was a hugely powerful force in doing that. And they did things like no one else did by knowing that core idea, that it led them to understand that actually design is worth the investment. Actually, those are things that that leads, not efficiency, and not that those are bad things, but there's an example of it. I'll give you just a quick example because I know we don't have much time, Mark, and I'll just give you an example of this thinking. This is powerful because what it does is leads you into thinking that our communication tactics and activities that only a particular brand can make, not one of the generic ones that everyone is doing. How do we get down to understand how we communicate in a way that's truly meaningful with our audience based on what we're promising and where they're at in our context? And a fun example of that is this was not, I can't take credit for this, but these some guys I really respect in New York who just inspired me in many ways. But really quickly, they tell us this is an agency in New York, and they were working with a fashion brand. And it was lingerie, okay? And it's a company that are launching a new lingerie brand. And don't have a huge amount of money, and they're going to, in the fashion industry, it's very trade show based. They go to these shows, the buyers and sellers all go to the shows, they launch. So there's Fashion Week in New York. These are huge deals, and get Calvin Klein, and Donna Karan. Everyone comes there and spends millions of dollars in order to meet with to make an impression and connect with these buyers. So you imagine you're a lingerie company, and you maybe got $100,000 to spend compared to Calvin Klein's millions that's going to be there. And traditional philosophy would say, okay, for a trade show, we get a booth, right? And then we maybe get a banner or something. Maybe we could sponsor a hospitality suite or something like that. And then our money's spent.
Kind of standard.
And in the context of everything else, you're just kind of going, peep, peep, in this field of 20,000 people.
Right.
Because Calvin Klein's got Cindy Crawford in the booth.
Right.
Okay, well, here's a great approach. So this company, what they did is they dug into their core idea. They understood that they're really only going for a particular kind of buyer. They knew that they weren't trashy stuff, but they weren't super high-end either. They wanted to be a little fun and a little irreverent. And so they wanted to connect in that way. And the fact that they're lingerie and not like, high couture means that they can act a little different.
Sure.
So long story short, this is what they came up with. They ended up doing a tactic at Fashion Week where they made stencils, okay, and they took water-soluble paint and they went around to all the hotels around the where the shows were, the subway stations, the taxi stops, and they spray painted this message on the sidewalk. And
What did it say?
the message said, "From here, it looks like you can use some new underwear. Visit us at www.whatever.com and booth number 7542." Well, people loved it. They got people reacted just like you just did. These
Wow.
sophisticated women would walk over in their fancy clothes and realize that sign's looking up their dress, and they start laughing. And then they ended up being at the show. They ended up getting covered by the trade media who was covering the show on this edgy new company, and they got coverage that they couldn't buy for Calvin Klein's $1 million. So I think, but it comes down to the stencils. There's no model for that. That's about thinking about what your brand is, who your audience is, and how you move them someplace in particular. So I think that's just an example of how you could be what I call tactically agnostic. It's like we don't know. We don't know what the answer is. Let's clarify who we're talking to and how we can move them, and then do that.
Robert, this has been fascinating. Every time we have a conversation, and for those that want to, I won't tell where you have coffee every morning, so people be bumping into you. But I love just running into you. Thank you so much for this. We're gonna, while I'm talking the next minute, you can go ahead and put in your questions in the question area. And so I do want to say thanks to everybody who showed up, but specifically, if you know people who would like to be a part of these conversations and learn about them, have them come to 805connect.com and join us. If you're interested in helping us in our mission to connect the people behind the businesses along the 805, I'd love to talk to you about being a partner with us. This is my funnest conversations are when I'm helping people understand how we can get them to have more visibility and greater reach inside the region while helping us with our mission. So thank you for that. So let's see, we've got some questions. Greg says, terrific information and perspective. Thank you very much. Yeah, you're welcome, Greg. Robert, they want to know how to reach you. So are you Robert at TheCoreIdea.com?
That's correct. Robert at TheCoreIdea, TheCoreIdea.com.
Ben wants to know, what do you recommend a startup brand dispel naysayers and instill confidence?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, a tight story, a confident, tight story helps. But I also think that they're going to get naysayers. One thing, get a thick skin. I think there's a million ideas out there. There's people are going to take pot shots at you for 1,000 reasons. And I think that's one thing. They're going to be naysayers. But for me, I guess I feel armed when I know what my story is. Right. I feel armed when I know what my core idea is. I feel armed when I feel like I can tell my story in a real clear way. And if there's a naysayer, if there's something I haven't considered, then I'd like to be in a place where I can accept that and learn rather than be defensive about it and know. But I think that's it. And you're never going to get everybody. I think that's a thing to know. It's like you want to communicate well with the audience that's there to receive your message. That's prepared to receive your message.
Right. Someone calls moving them towards the line, moving them towards the byline. Is there a great book that you would recommend for people who just kind of maybe a getting started or maybe even an intermediate book around branding and communications?
Yes.
Is someone you like to follow?
Yes, there is a book called Brand Gap by Martin Newmar. Yeah, Brand Gap is a great book.
Great.
That's a wonderful thinking on brands and just kind of in the spirit of this. And by the way, these are guys that I've learned from my study. There's a lot. I didn't invent this. I think I have a view of it that I've distilled and how I use it. But I studied a lot of guys like this that have thought about this and are very thoughtful. So I really like that one. There's also a book by a guy by the name of Paul Arden called "It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be." I think anybody doing marketing should read that book. It's fantastic. So
I think the smarter as a CEO, as a business owner that you are about that, it makes it easier to work with guys like you who come in and try to help us get clarity. So, Robert, thank you so much. We can, I hope you'll answer comments that we get in on the blog post. And, go to TheCoreIdea.com. And I want to thank everyone. First off, I want to thank our good friends at Citrix for stepping up and sponsoring the 805 conversations. Thank you very much. To you, our members and the attendees today, we are doing a really good job. I have 100%, 50%, 100% sign up, 50% show up, and I'm told not to worry about that. People will like to watch the replay, so we'll have the replay up in a couple of hours. Again, thanks, Robert. If you learned something today, tell somebody. Tell them how great these are. They're short, they're sweet. You can go back, you can pass them along to your colleagues. We hope that this is just more of the kind of the value that we want to bring to you with 805 Connect. And with that, I'm at 3:00 right on the money here, Robert. Thank you so much, buddy.
Hey,
Appreciate
Mark,
it.
thank you. Thanks for doing what you do. You're a great connector, man. This is your natural thing. Keep it up.
I appreciate it, buddy. Bye-bye.